screen. You great. Got it.
Yes. Where did it go to?
Great start to the video.
Go away.
Oh, sweet. That's funny. I was trying to click out of that. I always get confused with these share screens. This is an awesome turnout. What an honor. What an honor. Okay. Well, what we're going to do with everybody is we're going to share you this PowerPoint presentation. There's actually some different embedded videos, and we will point those out as we go along. To honor your time tonight, we won't do as many of those videos, but we're going to share the PowerPoint with you so you can see different testimonies and some shots of the classes. I assume everybody can hear me. So let me start with prayer, and then we're going to really jump into kind of defining what's our curricular approach. As you think every year about what's the best decision for your family and for your children and schooling, we want you to know what the apples and oranges are. And we will tell you what our oranges are, who we are. We're a really unique mission. And that means we're unique in how we do schooling, and we attract unique families. And so the families that you do schooling with are really unique. Before I'm a director, I'm a dad. And I have my 4 kids in the school, and I could not be more thrilled of who we are raising our kids alongside of. Everybody I'm seeing on this chat right now, like I have deep love for you guys. It's amazing. It's an honor. So let me pray that we're going to start off with a mission statement. Jesus, thank you that we can connect here virtually, and we just constantly give you this school. May we constantly grow as the most loving school on the planet, as we always talk about with the kids, because it's out of your love. The creator of this planet, of all the galaxies, that you are love. And you've shown us the depth of your love, not just by just creating us out of love, but then rescuing us, Jesus. And so I even as we talk and make plans and share our vision for the schooling, we put it before you, and we do pray that we'd be forming these kids to love you, love others, and have an incredible skill set to love others well. I'm going to pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so the next slide, you're going to see our mission statement. If you can unmute yourself, we're gonna say it together. So we partner with parents, right? I'll say it first, to inspire world changers through Christ-centered intercultural language immersion. I'll say it again. If you are on mute, just kind of echo back the mission statement. I want everybody to know this inside out. CBA partners with parents.
CBA
partners with parents
to inspire world changers.
To inspire world changers
through Christ-centered. Intercultural language immersion education. That's it. We put a ton of energy and planning into that. So the next slide, a lot of you, especially if you've been here year after year, you see this picture often. And let me show the picture, and then we'll show the video, explain the picture here of what our graduate looks like. And we're going to come back in about 15 minutes. Marilyn, if you can go there you go. Marilyn's going to break down these 3 domains of thinkers, communicators, and leaders. Even right now, as we are planning through what middle school is going to look like, we start by what does a graduate look like? And then we build backwards. And the beauty is we don't have to do what traditional schooling's always done. We can say, what are the best pathways to accomplish this graduate? And we want to be clear on that. We're not guessing. We want our students to be clear. So if we go back, Marilyn does assemblies every day with our 2nd through 5th graders, and it's energetic and there's fun cheers. I want to show you just 2 quick glimpses. One is where Marilyn asked them, who are we? Who are you? And they're going to be clear. And who are they becoming is the other chant. And we want students to know what are we building here. So go ahead, push play, and I hope you can hear it on your computers. It's not, Marilyn, can you hear the audio?
Who are you becoming?
So I think we figured as much audio wouldn't be super great. That's why we linked all this and we're sharing the PowerPoints with you. It's just not ideal with Zoom. But she's saying, who are you becoming? And I'll let you lead us in the chant, Marilyn. Teach us how you do it.
So each morning, I would ask them, who are you? And I want them to realize that they are CBA. They are who makes up CBA. So they yell back, CBA. I say, who are you? And they say, CBA. And then I say, but who are you becoming? And they go, thinkers, communicators, leaders. Let's go change the world.
That's awesome. And then you'll see on the slideshow that we're going to share with you, there's just another link to get another just peek at some cheers in the student assemblies. But we'll go forward 2 slides here.
Okay.
So we're going to come back to the graduate, and I want to ask you guys an icebreaker. And if you don't want to unmute yourself, that's fine. You can go to the chat though. And this is my question for you guys. What would you keep and what would you redo about your own education? If you would be so bold to either unmute and share thoughts or put it in the chat, and we'll give you 2 minutes here.
I would want to learn another language.
Yeah, early on, right? So we don't sound like big gringos speaking like I do.
Exactly.
What else? So we've done the parent chat 2 other times, and different things. So some people, they said what they would want to keep is they felt, especially in certain classes, they were really known. They were loved. The teachers knew them, and they would want that. They would want to keep that. And you can see in the chat, we're getting some other great responses. Work at your own pace, not necessarily stick with the average, but you could go ahead or get extra help if you needed. Experiential play, voice, opportunity to do different things, interaction with teachers, small class size. It's so funny because small class sizes have come up in the other 2 parent chats quite often. Learning about other cultures and tolerance and diversity, excellent. Busy work, right? Eliminate that. Thank you, David. I will aim in that all day long. Couldn't stand busy work. Good. Well, I just want to kind of freshen our thoughts for a second, because that's what we're going to be talking about, is how we're doing schooling, and some of it might be some of what you had, and a lot of it's redesigned. On the next slide, you'll just see throughout this PowerPoint presentation, we have different really, really good quick interviews with parents about their experience so far. We chose different veteran elementary parents, and then the Pappas who are new this year as elementary parents. If you wish, you could just ask a parent like, hey, you've made it through kindergarten, you made it through 1st grade. What's it like in other grades? These quick videos, I think you would find actually really, really helpful and pretty inspirational. And I kind of all just randomly put up 4 of our veteran families this weekend, said, can you just do an impromptu video to kind of share about your experience? So that'll be on the PowerPoint. But I have some other questions for you guys to ponder in the next slide. And as I read these questions out, I'd like you to think, which questions really resonate with you? Like you would say, Tell me more about that. Why is it important for curriculum to be driven by research, especially in child development? Why does mission matter? What does inspiration and critical thinking and active reading and persuasive communicating and desire to learn have to do with project-based learning? Is Singapore math really a big deal? Safety, does social, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual safety matter? I know we're quick to talk about safety. We got video cameras, we have the campus locked down, but what about these other areas, right? Class size, which a lot of you have already mentioned. Before I jump into some of them, whether in the chat or unmute, does one or two of those questions really jump out at you?
Singapore math.
That was the first one in our first parent chat. Several parents quickly jumped on that. Some were like, tell me, I'm still trying to figure it out. And others were like, my husband's from China and it's the greatest way to approach math. Please don't ever get rid of it. Why does mission matter? Good. All right. Well, so first off, and we've got a real different group here. We've got some parents that your children are still in our early childhood programs. And so I want to speak to you for a couple minutes to get you to kindergarten and then to first grade. And then for our elementary parents, you can chime in too as we start talking about this process. One of the videos you would have seen from Anisha Hezekiah, she keeps talking about this process. You got to trust this process, but it's a different process than what our own schooling looked like. So I want to remind you that when you came and toured the school, we talked about where children were at developmentally. And if you have insomnia tonight, do research on Piaget, Piaget. He's the trailblazer, the leader in child development theory, research, psychology. And he talks about several different stages. And early in their life, there's boom, 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 lots of stages. And we have an almost 2-year-old, and it's been really exciting to see her do these different stages. And then he says around the age of 2, they start this stage called the pre-operational thinking stage. And we would call that the preschool brain, the early childhood brain. And I always like to do this quiz question. If you want to risk embarrassing yourself, you can put it in the chat. At what age do you think this pre-operational stage ends? He says it starts around the age of 2. Do you think it ends around the age of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11? When do you think this preschool, early childhood brain starts to phase out and the new phase comes in? Take some guesses. All right, so I love the fact that you guys are really smart or cheaters, but the answers are really good on the chat right now. I would expect parents to say 4 or 5. And the reason I say that is because our traditional schooling approach in the last 30 years has really changed as we've gotten more and more comparative data to international data sets, and we see the United States is falling behind. And the primary approach to counter that is the United States wants to give our students a, quote, head start. So that head start means the 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old curriculum now are very literacy based. And they're not asking where's the child at. They're just saying, hey, maybe if we speed up schooling, we can catch up to the rest of the world. And it's interesting that most of your leading countries, your Finlands, Netherlands, France, New Zealand's, they're actually not starting school to 6 or 7 years of age. Now they're doing bilingual, trilingual, crèche, daycare, preschool, nanny, au pairs, but they're not doing formal schooling. What I mean by formal schooling, like when you talk about the 3 R's and specifically reading and writing, right? Literacy. They're waiting on that. And yet often we're saying, oh, the earlier the better. Which one of the parent testimonies, Shannon Galvan compares our school to other schools she's experienced. And she'll talk about how the rigor is similar to her girls who are too old for our school and Ashley Hall. She'll say it's such a similar rigor. But at another time, she gave a testimony and she said, I remember in first grade and kindergarten, first grade, Elias is still struggling to read, and his neighbors have been reading. And I'm getting all this noise of, what are you doing in that school? And then for us, like myself, who has a first grader right now, we're seeing this intense year of learning to read. And like, so how do we make sense of all of that? And so I first want to just say, what does the research say? The research says it's this pre-literacy brain, this pre-operational brain that starts around the age of 2 and goes to the age of 7. And it has everything to do with how your brain's structured, right? You've got neurons, and neurons want to make synapses. And the more synapses you make in life, the better neural interstates you construct in your brain. And the more construction you have, it leads to greater things like critical thinking. But what about these little kids who don't have neural interstates, right? They're still like chopping down the trees in the jungle to lay the first road. Piaget would say they're one-dimensional thinkers. And somewhere around 5, 6, 7, 8, really around 7 years of age, they start to really change into what he calls a concrete operational thinker. And he would say concrete operational thinkers are ready for formal schooling. They're ready for the 3 R's. They're ready for reading and writing. But he would say before then, you're teaching towards their weakness versus leveraging their strengths, because their strengths are development of motricity, development of social skills, development of language, oral fluency. Because a pre-operational thinker, he says they're one-dimensional thinkers. They have one dimension. I know your name. I know how to describe that event. I can name a symbol, A, B, C. I can name a complex symbol, hat, cat, bat. But it takes a child who's starting to really develop, which can happen at different ages, to start doing multi-dimensional thinking, which is, hey, that letter A has a name, A. It also has a sound, a, second dimension. You can combine that sound with other sounds, apple, third dimension. And that new sound, apple, now means something totally different than the letter A. It's a red, crunchy fruit. That's 4 dimensions. You see what I'm saying? That's 4 dimensions deep in your thinking. So when a child is cognitively able to think multidimensionally, Piaget says they're a concrete operational thinker. Should happen closer to the age of 7. So to be teaching literacy before then, you risk ruining your child's desire to learn or hurting it. Reading, yeah, they can read, they can pick it up. We can drill, they pick it up, but do they enjoy it? There's a massive study out of New Zealand comparing kids who started to read at 7 versus kids who began to read at 5. And the 3 statistically significant findings are the 7-year-olds always catch up. It's not like they're 2 years behind for the rest of their life. They catch up while they're still in elementary school. They enjoy reading more. And thirdly, they have deeper comprehension, which just makes sense. You remember more of what you enjoy reading. So my son, who's in the first cohort, the oldest class right now, when he started first grade, he's not reading, guys. Now he's perfectly fluent in 2 languages and took Mandarin for 4 years. We poured the foundation, the concrete foundation of 2 languages neurologically, and now we're going to spend 12 years building a skyscraper of knowledge on both of these languages. But if you had compared my son to other first graders for the first semester of first grade, he's not the valedictorian, guys. He's trying to figure out reading. And any of you who are on the call and have a first grader, like, it's a tough year because we're starting to teach literacy. But when it clicks, it clicks. And it usually happens about halfway through first grade year. My Rosie right now, it's starting to click. And I just finished reading with her in the bed, and she was doing the reading before I came to this call right now. Elliot, the knucklehead, gets himself in trouble every night turning his light back on because he wants to read. And we want to always cultivate the desire to learn. You're going to not find any research. If you get bored right now, go Google. You won't find any research on how early you start to read and your intelligence in life. You will find lots of research that says when the correlation between enjoying reading and reading a lot and intelligence. So you can just see this language ladder on the right side here of this idea of know where your child's at developmentally, and then that should drive your curriculum. So we do a play-based approach all the way through kindergarten. We're doing some pre-literacy. They know their letters. They can combine letters for syllables. They can combine syllables for words. They can combine words for sentences, but it's nowhere near what the traditional schooling's doing. For example, we looked at different Spanish curriculum like Santillana, Adelante to buy their resources. They have kindergartners in the second month of schooling studying subject and predicates. What if you told me if you don't learn it by the age of 5, you'll never learn it the rest of your life? Then I would say let's do subject and predicates for 5-year-olds because we'll miss the window if we don't do it right now. But that's not the case. That's the case with language, oral fluency. That window's collapsing by 7. So we wait for first grade to get into subjects and predicates because that's where they're starting now to get the multidimensional understanding of how written language works. It's really fun when you start seeing them say, oh, these words rhyme, and cat starts with ka, cat and hat, because now they're starting to see words as their own entities, and you know that change is coming. But then when we get into first grade, it is a different ballgame. We, instead of doing play-based education, we do project-based education. And what that looks like, we'll develop a big question that they have to answer, and it's often has a community or service theme into it. That could take weeks to answer that question. It's so different. My schooling was, hey, science is over. Put your science book up. Now pull out your social studies book and go ahead and copy down those 10 bold-faced terms. And don't forget there's a test on Friday, so study tonight. And you're going to be really nervous when you take that test. And everything was fragmented. Spelling was different than grammar, was different than social studies, different than science, different than math. Project-based says we do it all together. Our 4th graders right now, they need to study the solar system according to national standards in science. But we're not going to just read about boring nonfiction text on the planets and do a test on bold-faced terms. They just finished several weeks of answering the question, how do you safely land a person on Mars? And then they created their own rovers and put an egg in it and did egg drops off the roof of the Armory Park last week. And then they had to see why it didn't work. But all that's embedded as they did learn the planets. And they do understand how orbiting works and starting to understand gravity and getting into standards. But it's through a relevant, engaging, piquing their curiosity approach to learning. I never got that, guys. I was bored in school. We're designed by God to want to learn. Learning should be riveting. So project-based learning, it wants to be comprehensive. It wants to develop their thinking skills. We're building towards this middle school, and everything's about how do we get them to go from problem solving to innovating. We're going to call it a research and development approach, and we're looking at different schools that are already on that wavelength. Because we want our kids not just to be problem solvers. We want them to go create new thoughts and new innovative ways to solve things. Because if you're looking for a school to teach your kid to memorize and regurgitate, Siri's going to put them out of a job and you know it. We got to build critical thinkers. And then I'll throw one more thing in on Singapore math before I'll open it up to you guys and turn it over to Marilyn. Singapore math, why did we choose that? Because the premise of Singapore math is teaching kids to think logically. The premise of American traditional math is teaching kids to memorize rote operations. That's all math was. I did math through AP Calculus, and it was never more than memorize this for the test. As we get that comparative data, we see that East Asia is destroying, crushing the United States in math every single year. A couple publishing companies have wised up and said, let's print out and create material that teaches the way they teach. The problem is most schools don't want to do it because then you're asking your teacher to teach in a way they never learned. And it's hard work. We hire out our math teachers. They're engineers. Rasana's an engineer. Pam Davis has taught it in the past. She's an engineer. Taya is an MBA. They eat math for breakfast. and it's contagious. And if you see our math scores, you're going to see that it's not about some kids get math and other kids don't. Every kid can get math if they're contagiously excited about it. But it looks like this. It starts in kindergarten when you start teaching kids. It seems so simple. You just teach them numbers are made up of other numbers. You can construct and deconstruct numbers with numbers. Think about things numerically. You got a 5? We'll start off with 5 like Lego blocks. And then we'll see pictures of 5 Lego blocks. And then we'll see the picture of the number 5 goes from a physical to pictorial to symbolic. And then when we get that symbol 5, almost to imagine, like put a circle around it and draw 2 arms or legs underneath it like an octopus with 2 more circles. And they got to fill in those 2 other circles. What are 2 other numbers that can make up 5, right? 1, 4, 2, 3, 3, 2. And then we start erasing one of those, right? 3 plus blank equals 5, or blank plus 2 equals 5, or 3 plus 2 equals 5. And before you know it, these kids are starting to do algebra, right? But it's in a way that they see it according to the relationship of numbers to other numbers. I'll never forget when Elliot, first grader, comes into the kitchen and I say, what's 9 plus 6? And I was sure he wasn't going to get it. Mind you, we're doing all this in a second language. He says it's 15. And Singapore math is all about, you gotta explain your answer. You gotta think about your thinking. We call that metacognition. So how'd you get it, Elliot? He said, Dad, 9's only 1 away from 10. So I take 1 away from 6, it's 10 plus 5. That's really easy, Dad. Or then our second graders get those problems, those monster problems that I never liked, like 1,000 minus 111. Remember in your second grade handwriting, you're having to scratch out the 1 and carry over the 1, and then scratch out the 1, put a 9 and carry over another 1, and all in second grade handwriting. And you make a careless mistake, and by the end, you missed a problem and you're begging for partial credit. Versus a Singapore math student would say, let's think about this logically before we just jump into rote operations. If I subtract 1 from 1,000, I have 999. So why don't I just subtract 1 from 111? Now I have 110. I got a new problem. It's 999 minus 110. And I can do that in my head, and it gives me the exact same answer. Then they go and do that with a distributive property and multiplication, division. So it's teaching kids to be thinkers. Math is more than passing tests. It's teaching your kid to grow up and be logical, to be able to discern between truth, false, and opinions in a world that's going crazy, right? We want our kids to be thinkers. Safety. I really want you guys to listen to some of these parent interviews. Shannon Galbon gets into some of her kids are in older middle school and high school levels. And you want to talk about the real pandemic in the United States right now? To me, worse than COVID, it's the mental illnesses with our high school students. Go Google it. We're telling kids truth is what you want to make it. You decide how you feel today and what your truth is, and kids are drowning in it. And we want to establish our kids on a rock solid understanding of who are they? Why are they here? What's life all about? Because you can't do that when you have a curriculum that says, I don't know where you came from. It's probably a big cosmic accident. I don't know why you're here. So you go figure it out for yourself. And I don't know where you're going. That's a huge weight to put on an adolescent kid. I love starting chapel every year and just saying to the kids, first, we just talk about how much God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit love each other, and they overflow this ridiculous, glorious, eternal love into creation. And then they take this one special creature, says, I want to pour my love into you like a waterfall. Because you can't, a waterfall, it's the nature of a waterfall to overflow water. It's the nature of a loving God to overflow love. And humans were designed to be like that second waterfall. You get filled up, and then you go and overflow. You go love God and love others. You go take care of this creation. That's what we were designed for. I love looking at kids and say, oh, you're not an accident. You were specifically created by a loving God who wants to be with you. The story of the Bible on God's side of it is he wants to be with you. The problem is we see the story of humans in the Bible too, and it looks just like human history. Humans decided not to love God. We decided to love ourselves, and we're broken, and we got a broken history. We got a broken world around us right now. it's interesting seeing how our culture right now is just teaching people, if you disagree with me, I'm breaking relationship with you. And it's so easy with social media. I can just blast somebody with social media right from my room and my computer. And we're teaching our kids one of those, in that graduate picture, one of our domains is called the loving polemic, where we're teaching kids, you can disagree, but how do you disagree with a person and still be kind and loving to them? Just because you disagree with somebody doesn't mean you break relationship with them. You can disagree with some of their strongest convictions, but you can do that in a loving way. In fact, you'll find that you have even a stronger friendship when you can love somebody even when you disagree. It's easy to love people who are just like you. Being an intercultural school doesn't mean there's all truths and everybody can think of whatever truth and give our kid no foundation. Intercultural school says there is truth. That truth frees me to love everybody with kindness, even if they're very different than me. And by having smaller class sizes, we're able to really get to know the kids and walk them through whatever they're going through in life. So our vision is for a whole child. I want to stop, and I haven't been paying attention. If you put questions in the chat, Marilyn, if you want to pull up that next slide, because I want to pass the microphone to you about just kind of talking through those three things the kids were chanting earlier on. But feel free to take a second if you want to unmute anything you felt like I didn't unpack well enough there. All right, tag Marilyn.
You got it. And I'm very excited to be part of CBA and to hear that passion to say, how are we inspiring these world changers? And what does it mean that these students are image bearers and how God is working in them and through them? And so as we plan and as we look ahead, we always start with the end in mind. Just like if you were planning a vacation, you start with where you want to end up, and then you plan, how are we going to get there? What are we going to do when we're there? How are we going to know we're there? Those are the same questions that we ask. We want to know, where are we going to end up so that we don't get off track? And so we have the three main categories that we look at. We want them to be thinkers and communicators and leaders. So thinkers, we want them to know how to think, not just what to think. We want them to know how to think. Information is plentiful these days. Every child has all the information they could ever want and more. But what is really important is, what are they going to do with that information? How are they going to think about it? How are they going to begin to distinguish between truth and falsehood and opinion? When they read it, how are they going to know what that is? So we want to teach them to research, to organize, to analyze patterns, to synthesize, to say, I've got this plethora of information. Now let's see how it all fits together. And this starts from the very, very youngest children, even at the littlest ones, and they're outside playing and they're seeing a flower and one of them's growing and one of them's not. And the teacher is asking them, what's wrong? What's happening here? And they're looking at the information there and starting to think about it. What's this need? Oh, it needed water. It didn't get water. And very simply, they start to build on thinking. And then as we build throughout the years, we want to be asking them more and more and more questions. And we want the students to be asking questions and saying that we don't want just to end at an answer. An answer stops the learning. But every time we get an answer, we want to say, oh, that brings up a next question. What can I learn next? And then we want them, as they're learning to think, to really share their thinking. Like Nate was saying, not just putting down a math answer, but putting it down and then saying, this is how I got there. And to be able to talk through and share their thinking, and to help one another share their thinking. And we want them to really strive to understand. There's a saying that education is not just filling a bucket, it's lighting a fire. And we don't want to just fill their brain buckets. We want to light the fire to continue to learn and to be those lifelong learners. The second one, confident communicators. So we want them to be thinkers, then we want them to be confident communicators. It is said that a poor message that is presented well is stronger than a good message presented poorly. So we want them to learn how to present a good message well. And we want them presenting written. We want them to present orally and presentations. We want them to use technology to present. We're excited that they're presenting in multiple languages because we want them to present the message well. And so to build on that, we are constantly working on active listening and active reading and observing and gathering that knowledge and then learning how to put it together, wrap it together, and present it to others. For an example, when the fourth graders were learning about those Mars rovers, we had a speaker come in, a retired NASA engineer, come in and talk about space to them. But that's not where it ended. Then the students asked him questions and they interviewed him. And then they gathered all that information and used that as part of their discovery of what was happening in space. We want to do things to help them learn how to have those discussions even when they disagree. So we'll do what's called a Socratic circle discussion, where there's a group of students sitting and discussing an article or discussing a question that was asked. But at the same time, there's another group sitting around them, watching how they discuss. So there's one group that's actually discussing the material and another group that is evaluating, how is this discussion going? Is somebody monopolizing? Is somebody drawing somebody in and asking them more questions? Are they bringing in valid information to add to the conversation? And so we teach them specific discussion skills also, so that they're learning to communicate with one another, even when they might not agree with one another, but how can they learn? And we want them to communicate while they value that diversity and seek to understand that we see things differently. So how can we seek to understand rather than just make ourselves understood?
Right.
So we are developing thinkers, communicators, and leaders. We do want them to change the world. They are the next leaders of the world. And we want them to be those leaders, but we want them to be leaders that serve. Because we know that God has gifted each one of them uniquely, distinctly, but he gives them those gifts so that they can serve others and help others. So we want them to empathize with others regardless of differences. And we want them to actively love one another. And that's where leadership comes in. We want them to confront fear and say, you know what? I'm not going to let fear stop me from doing what's right. In our assembly, we talk about fight for what's right and to do what's right, not just what's fun or what everybody else is doing, but let's fight for what is right. And let's embrace a challenge. When it's hard, let's not stop. Let's say that's a new chance to learn. One of the things that we do is on Friday, we talk about Friday failures. And we look at people in the past who've had some pretty big failures, but they didn't give up. And they pushed through it and they went on to learn more and they set the pace and were leaders. Simple ones like Mr. Hershey and the chocolate bar, and how glad we are that he didn't stop when his chocolate kept failing and failing and failing, but he kept going. And now we all get to enjoy his chocolate. Or Steve Jobs, when he got fired from his own company, he could have just stopped and quit, but he didn't. He kept going and he kept trying. So we look at some people that had some Friday failures, but went on and embraced that challenge, and realizing that that takes grit, that takes perseverance, and it's going to be hard work, but it's worth it. We want them to embrace that challenge, persevere, and keep pushing ahead. So we hope that when they graduate, that we will get to see thinkers, communicators, and leaders that truly do go out there to change the world.
And we don't want it just to be what we tell you. We want there to be data that substantiates what we're talking about. And data can look different ways. We can tell you the data of the curriculum we put into it, the scheduling we do it, how we maximize 7 hours every single school day. But it's also things like I wish you guys could have, if you came to the parent chats the last 2 mornings, we actually brought students up in front of the parents. On this PowerPoint, you can click that second link and go to the 5-minute mark. You can see some really cool syllable silos that our first grade Spanish students are doing, and see how they're kinesthetically embracing the learning process. But then, like, we have report cards going out in the next couple of weeks. And I actually got privy to see my kids today, and several of the data points the teachers are giving me go right on these domains Marilyn's talking about. And one of my kids, as we're talking about the courageous leaders, the areas of treat others with kindness and action, speech, and attitude. That's a measurement. Takes initiative in helping others. Resolves conflict in an appropriate manner. One of my children scored low on those 3. I'm so grateful. I know that. I get that feedback. So how can I then create more of an action plan along with the teacher to start working with this child on these areas? Because he or she is not at that 8th grade level yet, right? But we're not there yet. But I'm glad I'm getting data in the process. We get data through the formative, ongoing, every day, small class sizes, teachers with the kids, seeing where they're growing. But then there's some summative data, right? As far as whether it's report cards or it's the end of the module math test, or it's whatever, reading fluency. We have these different summative markers. And then we take map testing too. So my 4th grader, he's done it 3 times a year. This week, he just did his 11th time. They're easy, non-stressful tests, but they allow me to see how is he growing across all the major state and national standards, and how does achievement compare to other students his age. Both of those matter to me, right? If he was really smart but never learned anything here, he would have great achievement, but he's not learning anything here. He's not growing. Or he could be growing a ton, but still not on level. Like, I want to know, is he growing and how is he achieving? And I can see that not just globally, oh, he's good at math, yay. No, he's struggling with place value, right? What are the areas he's struggling with? Where are his strengths? So I can really leverage his strengths. If you go to that next slide, Marilyn, this is the end of last year, our first graders. So keep in mind that the prior year was the first part of COVID. They lost the entire last 10 weeks of kindergarten. Also, our kindergarten is not heavy in literacy. So they're starting off behind their peers nationally. And this data set brings in our Spanish math scores, our Spanish reading, and our English reading, all in one big data set here. And the bottom left quadrant would say this child's struggling, right? And that would make a lot of sense if the child was like an ESL child. Struggling, not a whole lot of growth and not there in achievement. The top left quadrant would say tons of growth, but still hasn't caught up with his national peer set. The bottom right quadrant would say this kid's not growing very much, but is still highly achieving compared to the national peer set. And then that sweet spot would be that green box, right? To say, wow, the child grew a ton and is ahead of the national peer set. What blows my mind is those little purple squares. That's English reading. Okay, guys? We only do 2 hours of English reading. They didn't do kindergarten English. They didn't do pre-kindergarten English. And they only get 2 hours a day. And they outgrew and out-achieved the national peer set throughout the United States. That will get me fired up, okay? So we want to triangulate data. That's not the only data point, but we take that, we triangulate it with what's going on daily, what's going on summatively, and then what's going on in those other areas of just learning behaviors and the respectfulness, the responsibility, because we're working together with parents to form these kids to look like that 8th grade graduate. we're passionate. We start with end in mind, and then we back build it. I'll stop talking your head off. I will just say, Marilyn, thank you. I'm so grateful to God that Marilyn's here. She is amazing. We are complete opposites and incredibly complement each other. We've never had a dispute. We love working together, but she gets into details in an amazing way to make sure she's in with those teachers on a constant basis, growing them as they're growing our kids. And it's amazing. So thank you, Marilyn, for all you do for us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm glad to be part of this vision, and I'm just excited for what lies ahead.
So if you're tired, feel free to go to bed. I'll hang out though if you guys want to just ask some questions. Lauren, thanks for that story you shared in the chat, by the way. That's amazing. I can't say enough about this loving polemic piece. I long for our area, Park Circle, to be a safe place for people to engage in hard conversations and still love each other. And it's just so tough when the culture out there wants to just say, we disagree and we're going to shut you down. It's like, no. So I hope our school slowly will become a beacon to the rest of our community and just say, hey, let's make Park Circle different, to where we can say, I know you're different. Let's engage. Let's get to know each other. Let's learn from each other. And at the end of the day, if we don't agree, we still can love each other. That's still possible.
I have a question.
Yes,
Or a
Nicole.
So since you asked that reflexive question in the beginning about like the way we were schooled in the United States in education, how do you think it's best for parents to be supportive to their children as they're learning completely different than the way that we learned, and we don't necessarily know the curriculum, or we're not in the classroom all the time? So what's your advice on how to be supportive, or just let the teachers do it and just be a parent,
Yeah. It's going to look different in each year of their development. Like I've got a fourth, a second, and a first grader right now. And Rosanna and I almost tag team our first grader. The second grader's on almost autopilot, and the fourth grader's on autopilot. But especially when they're learning to read, it takes a lot more as they start getting homework. It's going to take a lot of parent involvement to help them really navigate that first year. But when the light bulb clicks, then they can really start navigating their own responsibility. If they can read it, they know what's expected, they can work on it. And then, I got a question. And then you can help them with it. I do think we got to constantly be monitoring that desire to learn. On one side, our generation of parents, we're going to tend towards too much coddling, right? But on the other side, you can push too hard and exasperate a child. And so where's that place to really develop grit? Because the culture is not saying kids need to persevere. Push them hard, but then at the same time, not too hard. And all the time, it's always enveloped. And we're doing this. As we do it, it's a loving process. And the reason we're doing it is so you can go love others more and not ever lose that end goal.
And I would encourage you also to marvel with them and stand in wonder. So, when you were walking, just spot the things that it's like, wow, how could that happen? And just ask them the questions and let them try to think through it. How can that bird walk on such tiny legs? How could that happen? And just marvel and help them continue to increase that. I want to know, how could that happen? God is incredible that he is doing this, and build that desire to want to know and want to understand. And then also read with them. Just sit down and read a good book and let them, stop as you're reading and talk about what you're thinking. I wonder why that character did that. Why did Aslan do that in that Chronicle of Narnia's book? I wonder if he really cared for them. And so that they're starting to hear how an adult thinks, and they're learning how to think from the questions you ask too.
Great question, Nicole.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What type of resources and like trainings do you give your teachers to be on the same page as like this whole spiel and y'all's vision? Because I mean, I agree with it, but as a prior educator, it's like I would love to know how you're getting teachers on board and trained to do the same.
I'll only start it, then I want to flip over to Marilyn. Yeah, I mean, and that's specifically unique, and it's not like there's project-based learning schools everywhere. It's coming up more and more in the research. This is what I was reading, and I don't think you can read it. That says flourishing together, and it's all about research on what schooling should be looking like. And so we're trying to connect with more schools that do project-based learning. One of my biggest takeaways in my doctoral studies at Vanderbilt, though, was how we often do professional development incorrectly. You know, it's like, hey, go to a 2 or 3 day conference and drink from a fire hydrant and then just go back to normal life, and practice never changes. Like the biggest key to practice changing is when it's embedded, it's ongoing. And that's Marilyn's number one role in the school is she's just working with teachers constantly. But I'll stop and pass the mic over to Marilyn on that.
Yeah, I do. I think that's exactly right, that we have to be in the classrooms and watching what's happening and helping the teacher say, wow, that was an excellent way to present that, the students were engaged in that. Have you considered this? And just constantly offering little steps that they can take. But then also learning from each other. The teachers they are incredible teachers. And they have so much wisdom and advice to help one another. And they're very willing to say, I don't know how to do that. Can you help me figure out how to do that? And then come around each other. And so we try to make sure that they're talking and they have time together also. And when we are able to have trainings times that we do, I want to use some of the techniques in our sessions that I want to encourage them to do in their sessions, in their classes. So if it is a Socratic circle, well, let's learn about what assessment is by doing a Socratic circle together so that they can be learning about it, but also learning a methodology to use in their classrooms. So it's that we want the teachers to be lifelong learners too. And I want to be a lifelong learner where I'm constantly learning something new. So again, so that we can give it to others. So it's a very slow process and just a constant encouraging one another and helping each other.
Yeah. Great question, Rachel. Anything else?
Thank you guys so much for doing this and for taking the time on your evening when you're already with our kids all day long.
Angie, you win the award though. You came this morning, so that means you're going to help us give the next talk. No, I'll finish with this. And God's goodness, CBA has attracted such a unique family. And I always think first with my dad hat. And I'm seeing all the names on the call right now. Like, I love you guys. And I'm so grateful. My kids' good friends are your kids. And we're doing this thing together, right? We get one shot at this parenting thing. And it's a huge joy for me to do it with you guys. So our doors are open. Our virtual doors are open too. If we said some things tonight you want to chew on, we are going to email out to you tomorrow the recording of this chat and also the PowerPoint presentation. I'd love for you to see some of those parent testimonies. Dulce sueños. Sweet dreams.
Thanks.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks for being here.
Hey, you saved the day with the I couldn't get my computer to work. The microphone worked. And then when I updated that privacy thing, now the microphone didn't work. And that's exactly what happened before the preschool Meet the Teacher this year. And I was so flustered.
Oh, I bet.
I was flustered out of my mind. We started 10 minutes late. And I was trying